You awaken before dawn, not to the sounds of battle or the chants of priests, but to the creak of your own bones and the dull ache behind your eyes, a quiet reminder that you are, after all, a bureaucrat in Constantinople. The year is 972 CE. The city is wrapped in a heavy, salt-laced fog drifting off the Sea of Marmara, and the domes of the Hagia Sophia are only just beginning to glow a soft amber in the rising light. The streets below your window, in the Blascherny quarter, are still empty. Market carts have not yet begun their slow roll across the cobblestones, but you are already dressed in itchy wool tunic beneath a carefully folded robe dyed with just enough murex purple to denote your middling but steady rank in the imperial bureaucracy. You are a scribe, a copyist, a man of letters, but not the kind sung about by poets or remembered in chronicles. You are one of the dozens, perhaps hundreds of men whose daily lives are spent in the shadow of power, laboring in the imperial chancellery to draft, revise, copy, and recopy decrees, orders, annals, and tax notices. You are, by training and temperament, precise. Your right hand is ink-stained in perpetuity. Your back curves slightly from years of leaning into candlelight. And your name, Theophilos, will likely never appear in any history book. But your words will. The arrival you walk to the chancellery just after the second cockcrow. The building, nestled behind the Bucolaean palace near the shore, is deceptively plain. The real beauty lies inside in the volumes, scrolls, and carefully guarded sigillographic cabinets, where the empire's bureaucracy breathes like a beast. Of parchment dot at the gate, the night guard, a young Thracian whose name you can never quite remember, nods you through. You descend the stone steps and into the cold, dry air of the record hall, which smells as always of wax, ink, and the faintest hint of mold. You light your personal oil, lamp permitted, after 6 years of uninterrupted service, and settle at your desk, one of dozens in neat rows beneath the arched ceiling. It is not glamorous work, but you have your own tools. A bone stylus, reed pens of various widths, an ink made of lampblack and vinegar, and a bronze paperweight shaped like an eagle, chipped on the beak, but otherwise serviceable. On your desk lies the first task of the day, a draft copy of an imperial chrysobull, a golden seal dictated yesterday by the logothetes Tong Secreton, one of the empire's most powerful ministers. Your job is to produce 3 error-free copies, each destined for different parts of the empire. One will go to the archives, one to the recipient, and one to the emperor's own sealed collection. And there can be no mistakes. The ritual of copying is not mere repetition. It is an act of worship, almost. You read each line aloud in a whisper, not for prayer, but for rhythm. The legal Greek is baroque, tangled, and exacting. Each verb tense matters. Each punctuation mark, though, rare carries. Wait. A misplaced diacritic could imply treason. You take a sip of lukewarm water from a ceramic jug at your feet, steady your hand, and begin. Your script is the minuscule, a tight, efficient style that evolved from earlier uncials. It allows speed without sacrificing legibility. Your pen strokes are practiced and silent, save for the faint scratching on the parchment. As you work, the hall slowly fills. Others arrive: Alexios with his limp, who copies legal treatises; Manuel the younger, who boasts of once transcribing a speech for the emperor himself; Irene, the only woman among you, tasked with transcribing hagiographies for the palace chapel. No one speaks much. Words are reserved for the page. Over the hours, your mind wanders in familiar loops. You think of your mother, long dead. You think of your nephew, who is studying rhetoric at the university. You think of your stipend, honest but dependable, and of the loaf of barley bread wrapped in cloth at your side. The text in front of you, though dull, is important. It settles a dispute between 2 monasteries over land, once thought infertile, now suddenly valuable after the construction of a new aqueduct. The emperor, Basil II, is not directly involved. Still, the decree must carry his authority and be perfect. The margins speak by late morning. You pause for a moment and stretch your neck. The sun has risen higher, casting slanted beams across the stone floor. You glance at the margins of the document and allow yourself a rare indulgence. A brief, coded note in the bottom corner of the second folio. Not much, a tiny scribble only. Another trained scribe might notice. A flourish of the letter theta, slightly exaggerated. A private joke referencing an obscure poem written by Gregory of Nazianzus. It's not allowed, of course, but it's harmless. A way of leaving a whisper of yourself in a world that demands anonymity. Sometimes you wonder if other scribes did the same. You've noticed the occasional doodle of fish, a cross, a tiny ship pressed into the parchment underlayers. They are not part of the empire's official memory, but they live here in the shadows of the margins. Your back aches. Your hand cramps. But you press on. The bureaucrat's lunch. You do not leave the building for lunch. Instead, you retreat to a small inner court, a stone square lined with worn benches and fig trees in terracotta pots. Your meal is simple: barley bread, dried olives, a few almonds, and a small piece of goat cheese wrapped in fig leaf. The food is plain but good enough. You eat slowly, grateful for the silence. Nearby, a junior scribe named Theophilos complains softly about a translation. He's working on a badly phrased tax edict issued in a backwater province and riddled with inconsistencies. You nod in sympathy but say little. You've learned that every document has its rhythm. You simply need to find it. Sometimes, as you eat, you stare at the chancellery's oldest wall, where faint traces of ancient Roman frescoes still cling to the plaster. You wonder if some long-dead Roman scribe once stood here, copying decrees for a long-vanished emperor. You feel a kinship with them, a lineage of obscurity bound by ink, a whisper of power as lunch ends and the scribes return to work. There is a stir near the north corridor. A messenger from the palace has arrived, bearing a sealed scroll marked with a double-headed eagle. It is rare to see one up close. Whispers spread. The document, it seems, contains amendments to an imperial proclamation concerning trade rights. In Trebizond, you are not assigned to transcribe it, but you steal a glance at the parchment as it's unrolled by the senior scribe. The wax seal is still warm. The handwriting is rushed, perhaps penned by the emperor himself or a chamberlain under pressure. You note the red ink used in the heading: Nu, G, Mu, Alpha, Tau, Iota, Tau, Omicron, Theta, Epsilon, Omicron, in the name of God. The phrase chills you, not out of piety, but because it marks the document as absolute. The scribe handling it adjusts his posture and begins copying without a word. You return to your own task, the edges of that imperial decree lingering at the corners of your mind like incense. In an old church, you realize something. Though you may never rule or fight or command, your hand moves with quiet authority. Your script shapes law. Your lines give form to power dot. As the sun lowers and the lamps are lit once more, you finish your final copy of the monastery decree and lay it carefully to dry. Your back hurts. Your hand is stained black again. You are exhausted in a way only those who sit still for hours can understand. And still, you wonder, who, centuries from now, will read this decree? Will they wonder who wrote it? Will they notice the tiny flourish in the margin? Or will your life dissolve into parchment like so many others before? Section 2. The afternoon scrolls and the chancellery's whispering walls. The sun stands high above Constantinople, though from within the cool walls of the imperial chancellery, you'd hardly know it. The thick stone blocks and narrow, slit-like windows preserve the early morning gloom, the kind of half-light that seems tailored for men who live among ink and parchment. The oil lamps flicker again now, trimmed for the second shift of the day. You've resumed your place, joints creaking quietly as you lower yourself onto the grooved wooden bench worn smooth by decades of steady use. Your name is Theophilos, middle-grade scribe in the Byzantine imperial service. Not a court poet, nor a minister of policy, just a bureaucrat in robes, whose fingers are more familiar with the contours of a reed pen than a sword hilt. The first copies of the morning's chrysobull have dried neatly under blotting stones. You've sent them off to the sealers, who'll fasten each with a wax insignia stamped in gold leaf pigment. But your work is far from over. The second stack each day brings a second wave of tasks after the noon meal, rarely less tedious than the first. This afternoon's stack is ominously tall. Memoranda, correspondence, copies of old decrees for provincial governors requesting clarification on minor points of land ownership or ecclesiastical privilege. You scan the list. One is a letter to a bishop regarding sheep tithes in Cappadocia. Another, a dispute about wine transport tariffs in the Thracian hinterlands. You sigh softly, inwardly, and choose the least offensive one to begin with. Copy of an archive edict on fishing rights along the Bosporus, dated 30 years prior. Why someone has requested it now is unclear. Perhaps some coastal landholder is asserting ancient privileges. Or maybe, as you sometimes suspect, the bureaucratic process sustains itself by devouring its own tail, producing more documents just to clarify previous ones. You prepare your tools again, dipping the pen in fresh ink. The letters glide across. The parchment, each one a small architectural act. Upright, balanced, curved in strict proportion. A trained scribe does not merely write, he draws with deliberate cadence. A hurried or slanted script reflects poorly on the scribe, and by extension, on the empire itself. The voices of the archives, as you write, your thoughts wander into the next room, what the clerks jokingly call the whispering vault. It's the chi, oldest part of the chancellery, and the most unsettling. A long corridor lined on either side with tightly sealed document cabinets, some of which haven't been opened in generations. Their locks are ornate, and some even contain prayer inscriptions for protection, more superstition than policy, but no one has the nerve to remove them. Inside these cabinets rest scrolls and bound folios, stretching back centuries. Tax rolls from Emperor Heraclius' time. Merchant licenses from when Justinian still ruled. Even older fragments, barely decipherable, from the days before icons were banned and reinstated and banned again. Occasionally, you're sent into the whispering vault to retrieve an old law, or an imperial genealogy. The sound there isn't quite sound at all. It's the dry crinkle of old parchment shifting as air moves through narrow gaps. A soft sighing noise like paper, remembering its purpose. No one lingers long. Most scribes fetch what they need and scurry out like mice from a cellar. But you, Theophilos, linger a bit longer. You've seen things no one else seems to notice. Marginal notes written in multiple hands across centuries. Annotations correcting earlier annotations. Even one decree from the year 811 that appears to have been copied 4 times in the same week, each with slightly different wording. Why? No one can say. The emperors changed. The wars ebbed and flowed. But the ink marched on. You once asked your supervisor about it, and he only shrugged. The empire must remember itself, even if it forgets why. When the paper talks back at your desk, a curious thing happens. As you copy the Bosporus decree, your eyes fall on an odd clause toward the bottom, a restriction on fishing with weighted nets during moonless weeks. It's an old superstition, once common among coastal communities, meant to appease sea spirits or discourage overfishing. What catches your attention, though, is the marginal note beside it, written in the delicate hand of a former scribe perhaps long dead. Retain this phrasing, though the logic is unclear. The patriarch objected once. You frown slightly and sit back. This is the paradox of your work. You are expected to copy precisely, and yet sometimes your task is not merely to replicate, but to interpret, to transmit not only language, but intention. A bad scribe misses the meaning behind the words. A good one sees it, senses it, and guards it with quiet fidelity. You leave the note intact, just as the scribe before you did, even if the patriarch has been dead for 20 years. Irene and the golden codex across the hall. Irene is hard at work. You glance up to see her copying excerpts from a newly commissioned codex of saints' lives, a golden-leafed, icon-adorned manuscript destined for the emperor's private chapel. She handles the gold ink with impressive steadiness, using a feather-soft brush for the final decorative initials dot. It's rare for a woman to hold a scribe's position in the imperial service, but Irene is exceptional quick-witted, precise, and nearly silent as she works. She nods to you briefly when your eyes meet, then returns to her task. The codex she's copying is something more than bureaucratic. It's sacred. But even here, she follows strict procedure. Margins must be exact, ink density uniform, abbreviations consistent with council rulings. The divine must also obey paperwork. Sometimes you envy her. The gold, the saints, the sense of purpose. But even your scrolls, dull decrees about fish and land and taxes, are pieces of something enduring. Threads in a vast tapestry that only a few ever see in full. The chancellery's pet philosopher in. The mid-afternoon, a rare distraction arrives. One of the senior scribes, a man named Simeon, returns from a side chamber with a sheaf of papers and a small, battered stool. He announces that he will read aloud from the Strategicon, an old military manual attributed to Emperor Moristot. It's become something of a tradition. Simon's philosophy hour. Not sanctioned, but tolerated. For 15 minutes, while pens rest and shoulders relax, he recites portions of ancient texts. Not the famous ones, no Homer or Aristotle, but obscure tactical treatises, letters between forgotten generals, and once, even a weather report from a Thracian outpost. Today's selection is dry even by his standards. In the event of prolonged cavalry siege in swamp terrain, the supply of oats must be weighed daily to account for saturation of grain. You smile faintly. Someone chuckles. Even Irene rolls her eyes. But you listen. Because here, in this dullness, lies the soul of your work. These were real issues once. Real oat shortages. Real cavalrymen waiting in real swamps. Their story lives on only because someone, centuries ago, thought it worth recording. Symeon ends his reading with a wink. History belongs to those with the time to write it down. You all return to your tasks. The silence heavier now, but Companionable. The slow descent into dusk by late afternoon. The air in the hall grows thick. Lamps burn lower. The chancellery's mood shifts from industrious to weary. Most scribes will continue until the 5th bell, just before dusk. Unless a new priority arrives from the palace. You check your tally. 4 scrolls, 1 codex page, 3 minor letters. Not a record, but steady. Respectable. You take a moment to clean your reed pens, sharpening the nibs carefully on a pumice stone. You dry the inkwell lids and wrap your paperweight in cloth. These small rituals matter. They shape your day, define your space in a system that often feels boundless and impersonal. And yet, you are part of it. In the silence, you hear it again, that whisper of the old documents behind the stone wall. Not voices, just time itself rustling. You wonder, how many scrolls lie unread in those vaults? How many decisions, tiny, vital, forgotten still, shape the world we live in, though their authors are dust? Nightfall, memory, and the emperor's hand. The light in the chancellery fades slowly, in increments so slight they are almost unnoticeable until suddenly you realize that the hall has gone dim and the lamplighters are making their way down. The aisles. The scent of hot oil and burnt wicks joins the familiar perfume of ink and parchment, marking the descent into evening.u. Theophilos are still at your desk. Your hands are stained, your shoulders tight, and your lower back throbs. In the familiar rhythm of quiet endurance. Around you, most scribes have finished their tasks and are gathering their scrolls, tying off bundles with soft twine, setting their tools in tidy rows for the next day's work. Some murmur quietly about what they'll eat for supper. A few trade notes about an imperial procession scheduled for the coming week. But you are not finished. You've been summoned. A call from the logothete. The message came by a boy barely tall enough to see over your desk. A folded scrap bearing the seal of the logothetes to Dromu, the official in charge of imperial correspondence, roads, and spies. An unexpected request. You are to report to a private chamber on the upper floor. No details given. No explanation. You climb the spiral stair with care, the stone steps slick with years of wear. You pass painted niches icons of saints beside miniature busts of Roman emperors. The empire remembers everything, even what it pretends to forget. At the landing, a clerk lets you in. The room is warm, firelit, and surprisingly quiet. The logothete, an older man with hawkish features and eyes like dull glass, waves you forward. A scroll lies open before him. He taps it with 2 fingers. "We have need of someone with a steady hand," he says. "A copy must be made now, and no errors." You nod, as is expected. Questions are not welcome here. He unrolls the document fully. You glance down and feel a faint jolt in your chest. This is no ordinary decree. It is a prostagma, a personal order, written in the emperor's own voice. The ink is darker than usual, the letters more fluid and spontaneous. Perhaps Basil himself dictated this one. Perhaps the ink is barely dry. It concerns a delicate matter, the appointment of a new strategos, a military governor in a volatile border region. The recipient is a nobleman of uncertain loyalty, and the tone of the document is carefully balanced, authoritative but conciliatory, assertive but respectful. You are to produce 2 copies, one for dispatch, one for internal record. Before nightfall. The emperor's voice. You sit at a narrow table beneath a brass lamp. The parchment is thick and fine. The ink prepared especially for such tasks, smoother, richer, and meant to last for decades, centuries. Even, this is different from your usual work. Normally, you copy the decisions of others. But here, you are channeling the emperor's own breath. The phrasing, the cadence, even the flourishes in his diction. They must be preserved exactly. Not only the what, but the how. This is a performance in ink. As you begin, you feel your body sharpen. The room fades. All that remains is the pen, the page, and the voice of empire passing through your hand. The words flow. Let it be known, by my hand and the will of God, that Basileus Basil, defender of the cross, appoints ... Each line must be perfect. You copy, then review, then copy again. Your eye catches on a repeated phrase. You correct it. You check the margins precisely 3 fingers width from the edge. The title lines must be centered. The imperial monogram added in vermilion. All must be correct. All must be legible, yet solemn. Somewhere below, the final bells of the day toll over the harbor. Constantinople exhales. Candles are lit in distant houses. Ships rock gently in the Golden Horn. But here you remain, quietly transcribing the will of the world's most powerful man. And in that silence, something strange happens. You feel, for a moment, important. Not in the way of generals or patriarchs, not with trumpets or victory arches, but in the quiet, grounded knowledge that if you were to drop your pen or miss a line, the gears of empire, however subtly, might grind slower tomorrow. That's the thing no one tells you about being a scribe. You're not just recording history, you are history. The seal and the shadow when the final flourish is made and the scrolls laid to dry. You present them to the LOGOTHE. He reviews them in silence. A nod, nothing more. Approval, at least. Deliver. This to the sealing chamber, he says, handing you the dispatch copy. You bow slightly and exit. The sealing chamber is always colder than the rest of the chancellery. It's said the chamber lies above an old Roman aqueduct, the stones still damp with distant water. Here, the scribes are silent, but the seals speak. You hand over the document, and the sealmaster, a thin man in a hood, applies heat to a wax tablet, presses the imperial bulla, and stamps it shut. You watch as the golden seal hardens. A double-headed eagle, a cross, an emperor's name pressed into permanence. You return to your desk at last, alone. The final light, the hall is nearly empty. Even the lamps have been extinguished, save one flickering near the arch. You gather your tools slowly, placing each one in its assigned slot. The ink pots are corked. The pen tips are cleaned. The parchment shavings brushed away. You stare for a moment at your blotter. It bears the ghost of the day's work. Smudges. Ink traces. The faintest imprint of imperial authority. Then, quietly, you open a small drawer. Beneath your desk. Inside is a single scrap of vellum, yellowed and curled at the edges. You've worked on it slowly over months, perhaps years. A small poem, written in secret, not for publication, not for approval. A meditation on the rhythm of your life, your tools, your bench, the endless shuffle of scrolls and seals. You read the latest line aloud, just once. The emperor dreams. I hold the quill. You smile faintly, fold it. Close the drawer. The walk home. The streets of Constantinople at night are not entirely quiet. You hear the hooves of patrols, the clack of sandals, a distant dog barking toward the docks. The air smells of smoke and fish, and above you, the stars shimmer beyond the city's thick veil of incense and oil. As you walk past the hippodrome, you think not for the first time that someone will write about this city one day. Its towers, its glories, its battles and betrayals. But who will write about the parchment folders, the indexing clerks, the men who spent 30 years drawing perfect loops on imperfect hides? Who will remember you? And then you smile again, because you already know the answer. They won't, but your work will. You reach your small apartment, remove your sandals, and place your robes neatly over a wooden peg. You wash your hands in cold water, the ink still clinging in the grooves of your nails. The lamplight flickers one last time. You blow it out. Darkness. And yet, as your breathing slows and sleep begins its descent, one quiet question lingers in the air. What if, centuries from now, a scribe, like you, finds your handwriting in a forgotten archive? What will he think of your hand, your habits, your heart pressed into a page? The tabularium and the chicken with no name you wait before the bells. Not the grand tolling of the temple chimes or the cheerful clang of a marketplace, but the quiet, wet cough of an old man in the apartment next door. You live in a cramped insula 4 stories up, tucked in the shadow of the Capitoline Hill in Rome, around the year 73 CE. Your window is little more than a wooden shutter, your bed a straw mattress on uneven floorboards. But you rise with purpose. You are a census clerk, not a governor, not a senator, not even a high-ranking scribe with gold-threaded robes. You are a minor functionary of the cursus publicus, the civil service of the Roman Empire. Your job today, as always, is to count people, property, chickens, A climb into numbers, you dress plainly. Tunic, sandals, a belt for your stylus case. You carry no sword, no scroll of law. Only a worn wax tablet, a few styluses, and a small pouch. Of olive bread for later. You descend the stairs slowly, avoiding the rotten board on the second level. That once sent a neighbor tumbling into the arms of a fish vendor. The street is already alive with the rumble of carts and the shouts of hawkers. You pass under laundry lines, dodge a mule, and squeeze past a bakery where the scent of warm grain follows you like a question. The tabularium, your place of work, sits at the base of the Capitoline, an imposing stone structure that houses the empire's records, ledgers, and archives. Marble steps lead to its wide portico, where others in wool robes already gather, clutching tablets, parchment, and in one case, a squawking goose held under an arm. You nod to colleagues. None of them speak yet. Too early. You enter, filing the empire inside. The air is cool and dry, a blessing. The archivists insist on keeping the upper floor shaded and the doors cracked just enough for circulation. They say dry air preserves parchment. You believe them. Your desk is near the southern wall, close enough to a window to catch the early sun. On it, a stack of lid tokens, your tablet, and a list of assigned governors and insulae in the Subura district realms. Most densely packed and arguably most confusing neighborhood. There are no formal streets there, just an organic sprawl of dwellings, workyards, and micro-markets folded together like badly stacked amphorae. And that's your job today, to return there and resume the count. The quinquennial census is in full swing, and as one of its many clerks, you are tasked with verifying headcounts, property records, livestock tallies, and by request of the Senate, ensuring that every Roman citizen is properly categorized. You sigh, tuck the list under your arm, and head out once more. The Subura smells like boiled onions and goat hair. The Subura is many things. Noisy, packed, smelly, but most of all, confusing. The alleyways curve like snakes, and no two homes are built with the same floor plan. There are shops below, rooms above, and rooftops that double as courtyards. You begin with a wine cellar named Flavius, whose household was marked incomplete on the last roll. Still 5 in your house? You ask, stylus hovering over. The wax. Flavius nods, then pauses. 6, actually. My sister came back from Baia. She's staying now. You scratch in the correction. Any property change? New goats? Chickens? He hesitates. One of the hens died, but we bought another. I think you frown slightly. So, still 3? Possibly 4. You write 3 to 4 hens, verify, knowing you'll have to follow up. The imperial record must be precise. If every chicken were off by 1, you reason, the empire could lose count of tens of thousands of poultry in a matter of months. And that, you think, would be chaos. You move on. A smith with a new daughter. An elderly widow with a cat she insists counts as household inventory. A baker who insists he's still unmarried, but clearly has a baby on his hip. You ask careful questions. Age, status, origin, occupation. You do not PR, why more than you must. But you do not miss a detail. The impossible goat at midday. You rest briefly at a shaded portico and chew on your bread. A stray dog eyes you from a few feet away. You toss him a corner. He nods his thanks, or seems to, and disappears. A boy runs up the alley, holding a goat on a rope. Sir, he shouts, this goat isn't ours. You blink. What do you mean? It just showed up in our courtyard. Mother says if you write it down, it'll be ours, and we'll get taxed. But we didn't buy it. You scribble in your tablet. Goat, unclaimed, address uncertain. Investigate. Later, you return to the boy's house. The goat is chewing laundry. You ask around. no one knows where it came from. The census cannot record mystery goats. But if it's living on Roman property and feeding on Roman grass, it is technically taxable. You file it under interim livestock. The chicken with no name. At the third house, you visit in the afternoon a stone house with a leaky roof and a pleasant ivy wall. A woman hands you her household list with practiced ease. 5. Residents, 2 pigs, 1 donkey, 1 chicken. What's the chicken's name? You ask, out of habit. Sometimes it helps to identify. She squints. It doesn't have one. You pause. No name? She shrugs. It's a chicken. You write, chicken unnamed, 1. You realize, not for the first time, that most people think you mad for recording such things. But your job is to record the world as it is. Even the parts no one thinks matter. The authority of the tablet back at the tabularium by mid-afternoon. You unload your tablet into a fresh scroll, a clean copy, to be entered into the census ledger later that week. You use fine ink now, the kind mixed with a little fig gum to prevent smearing. Your lines must be straight, numbers consistent. Your margin notes, though small, must remain legible. These are living documents. A supervisor passes behind you. You hear the pause in his step. He glances at your work. Still counting chickens? Yes, you say, and 1 unverified goat. He grunts, which in Roman bureaucratic culture is as close to praise as you'll get. You complete your transcript, wrap the scroll, and tie it with linen string. A wax seal will be added later, and then it will be placed in the census chest, alongside dozens, hundreds of others. Each scroll a thread in the great fabric of Roman order. The philosophy of lists sometimes. In the quiet of late afternoon, you wonder about it all. The lists. The endless columns of names, ages, animals, and dwellings. Will anyone read them? Will some future clerk run their hand along your handwriting and wonder who you were? Will they read your tally of unclaimed goats and unnamed chickens and feel, somehow, a flicker of recognition? Maybe, maybe not, but the point is not remembrance. The point is the system, the order, the knowledge that, for this one afternoon, in this small corner of the Roman world, the empire knew exactly how many people slept under these roofs, and how many chickens squawked beside them. As you gather your things to leave, you glance once more at the day's scroll. There, in small, clear letters, is the name of a woman, her 4 children, 2 pigs, 1 donkey, and a chicken with no name. You smile. And for a moment, you feel that the entire weight of empire rests quietly not on swords or ships or statues, but on the back of a single wax tablet, carried by a man with dusty sandals and very tired feet. And yet, you ask yourself, what happens when the numbers don't match? When the names change faster than the scrolls? Is order ever truly possible in a city that keeps changing its face? Mistrust, mules, and a census that forgot itself. The second day of your assigned census round begins with a headache and a misplaced stylus. You find it eventually wedged under your sleeping mat, stained with the oil from your evening lamp. You wipe it clean with the edge of your tunic and head out into the humid morning air of Rome. This time, you've been assigned the Vicus Patricius, a narrow, twisting neighborhood perched between 2 hills, too wealthy to ignore, too unruly to simplify. A tangle of citizens, freedmen, tradespeople, and 1 particularly outspoken mule. You're still Theophilos, not the same one from the first story, but a common enough name in the empire. A clerk, a counters of things. Your job remains the same. Capture Rome in numbers. Translate living mess into ledgers. And try, as best you can, not to make any of it personal. A man named twice your first stop is a domus owned by a certain Lucius Fabius Silenus, a name you recognize from previous years. The records say he owns 5 slaves, 2 dogs, a small vineyard in Etruria, and oddly no registered family. But when he opens the door today, he introduces himself as Marcus Fabius Silanus. You raise an eyebrow. Your name, citizen. The census lists you as Lucius. He frowns. That's my brother. He died. You are not Marcus? I am Marcus, but Lucius was. I mean, I took his estate, his records. You scribble a note, though technically the law forbids assuming. Another citizen's name in census matters. Any changes to household staff? Property? He gestures vaguely toward a closed door. One of the kitchen slaves ran away. We bought another. Do you know the runaway's name? He shrugs. Just cook. He made stews. You mark the field as absconded. Name unknown. It's not uncommon. But as always, you wonder, where do people go when they slip out of the census? Do they stop existing in the eyes of the empire? You move on. The mule who hates clerks in a cramped courtyard further down the street, you encounter a transport worker named Junius, whose household includes a brother, a grandmother, 2 nieces, and 1 mule. The mule, a large hairy beast named Vibula, takes an instant dislike to you, as you begin questioning Junius' names, ages, ownership. The mule edges closer. When you pull out your wax tablet, Vibula lunges and knocks it to the ground with her snout. She doesn't like officials. Junius mutters apologetically. You retrieve the tablet, brush it off, and continue. How old is the grandmother? No idea. She's older than the stairs? And the mule? 7 years. She's on the record. Any new livestock? Junius leans in, lowers his voice. There's a lizard that lives in the wall, but I don't feed it. You note. 2 nieces, 1 grandmother, and 1 unfriendly mule. No lizard. Vibula watches you the entire time with sullen judgment. The Hall of Mirrors at midday. You are summoned back to the tabularium for what the supervisors delicately call reconciliation. In truth, it's damage control. Inside a long, dim hall, scribes from various neighborhoods are gathering with their scrolls. Errors are compared. Duplicate entries. Conflicting head counts. Citizens who claim one address and appear in another. It is the unglamorous underside of empire. Not the laws. Not the legions, but the messy reality of data. One entry reads, Tiberius Quintus Maro, aged 37, baker, single, no dependents. Another, from a different clerk, Tiberia Quinta Marcia, aged 37, baker, single, no dependents. The room groans. A name misheard? A joke? A ghost? A senior clerk notes, it's the same person. A handwriting error, and possibly a hangover. The line is corrected, the scrolls adjusted. You wonder again, how many lives live double on paper, simply because someone's pen slipped? Your own scrolls are returned with minimal corrections. A mark of honor. The census that forgot itself in the afternoon. You continue your rounds. At a modest home near the forum. A man answers the door wearing a tunic stained with grape skins. His name is Decimus, a cooper and part-time vintner. You ask for the household head, he says. It's me. When you ask who owns the house, he says, my brother. When you ask if the brother lives here, he replies, no, he lives with our mother. And the mother? She died last winter? You pause. And your brother? He also died. During the fire. You stare at your notes. The last census 5 years ago lists this address as housing 3 people. Decimus, his brother, and their mother. Now it's 1 man. Alone, still tending vines. What should I write? You ask. He shrugs. That I'm still here. You write that. Nothing more. The empire believes in structure, in numbers, in carefully defined hierarchies. Of land and labor, but the truth is Messier. People move. People die. Some vanish. Some remain uncounted, but very much present. Margins of memory. You return to the tabularium late, your sandals caked in dust. The sun is setting, and the building casts long shadows across the forum. You ascend the stone steps and re-enter the record hall, where the scribes still work beneath the great beams dotted your desk. You spread your notes and begin to copy them into formal scrolls. Carefully, line by line. Numbers, names, livestock, ages, neighborhoods dot the wax tablet. Beside you bears smudges from Vibula the mule. A faint hoofprint, perhaps. You decide to leave it. Let the next scribe wonder. Your eyes grow heavy. You reread. A list from earlier in the week names already beginning to blur. And suddenly you see an oddity. The same child, listed in 2 different homes. You check dates, addresses, names. She's 7 years old, named Gaia, and appears as a daughter. In one house and a niece in another. Both mothers insist she's theirs. You write in the margin. Discrepancy. Possibly being raised jointly. Confirmed guardianship. But the truth is, no one will follow up. Not for a child. Not for a chicken. Not for a goat. The system absorbs errors like bread absorbs oil. Still, you write it down, because the job is not to decide truth. The job is to record what is known and mark what is not. The numbers breathe by candlelight. You finish your final scroll. You place it gently in the storage basket labeled Region 7, Misc Livestock. Nearby, another scroll bears your notes on Flavius's household. Another tracks poultry deaths in the Aventine. One lists property boundaries that no longer exist. Altogether, they form a kind of heartbeat. The empire lives in these lists. Not in statues or battles or speeches, but in the quiet churn of paper and wax, and weary men with stiff fingers. You extinguish your lamp. You pack your tools. And as you walk through the colonnade into the soft Roman night, the forum glimmering faintly in the distance, you feel something strange. Not pride, not satisfaction, but a vague and steady comfort. That in this moment, someone, somewhere, knows how many people live in Rome. Roughly. Probably. More or less. But then, as your sandals echo on the flagstones, you find yourself wondering, what happens to the empire when no one counts anymore? When the scrolls rot and the chickens go unlisted and the names vanish into forgetfulness? Is Rome still Rome without its lists? Section 3. Scrolls, storms, and the last chicken in Rome week has passed. You, the census clerk of Region 7, stand once again beneath the gray stone archway of the tabularium, Rome's great archive and bureaucratic heart. The air smells of rain and old paper. Inside, the marble floors sweat faintly in the humidity, and the wax on scroll seals grows soft in the corners. It is nearing the end of the census period. The quinquennial tally 5 years in the making is coming to a close. You have walked dozens of miles across cobbled alleys and up creaking stairwells. You have counted elderly uncles who claim to be 40, babies that appear without explanation, goats that defy classification, and chickens, so many chickens. Today's assignment, however, is unusual. You are not out counting. You are auditing. The lost records of Region XIV1 of the outer districts, Region 14, near the Porta Capena, has submitted inconsistent census data. There are gaps in their scrolls, entire families missing, age records swapped, property lists duplicated. The regional census leader has resigned, citing illness, and the remaining clerks are overwhelmed. You've been selected, along with 2 others, to review the matter. You travel on foot, past the Circus Maximus, past the old temples worn smooth. By time, the sky is heavy with cloud. Rain spatters the paving stones. Your stylus case bumps gently against your belt as you walk. Region 14 is a different world. Less crowded than the Subura, but more unpredictable. Traders live beside priests, retired legionaries next to Greek tutors. The homes are older, often layered over earlier foundations. In one courtyard, a woman offers you a fig and warns of snakes in the well. You thank her, take the fig, and move on. The man, with no scroll, at the edge of Region 14, you come to a modest home made of reused brick and ancient marble fragments. A man greets you with a toothless smile. He is dressed like a freedman, but speaks like a patrician. Name? You ask, stylus poised. Marcus Varius, he says. But I don't have a scroll. You frown. No registration? He shrugs. Never registered. Been here 10 years. No one ever came. You check your list. No Marcus Varius appears. Occupation? I look after cats, he says. You hesitate. Professionally? He grins. I didn't say that. You record him. Anyway, add a note to initiate proper registration. He might be one of hundreds people who've lived and worked in Rome for years, never appearing in any scroll. Rome is like that, a city of shadows and shells. Not all of it is captured in ink. The chicken that shouldn't exist as you complete your sweep of Region 14, you pass by a temple dedicated to Tellus, the goddess of the earth. It's mostly ruins now, converted into storage for farming tools. Near the steps, a child sits feeding something from her lap. You approach slowly. It's a chicken, but not just any chicken. It's tagged. On its leg is a small strip of leather, marked with a crude name, Liciniia. You recognize it. 5 years ago, you recorded a chicken named Liciniia in Region 7. It belonged to a widow named Tulla, who insisted her chicken was smarter than most senators. That chicken, you remember, was recorded as deceased 2 years ago. You crouch beside. The girl, where did you get her? She was my grandmother's, she says. She died last month. The grandmother? No, the chicken. You exhale slowly. So Liciniia is dead. Again, possibly twice. You cross out the entry on your tablet. Any others? You ask. She shakes her head. Only ghosts. Auditing the empire back at the tabularium, you and your 2 colleagues present your findings. The numbers are read aloud in the Hall of Counters. Region 14 is missing 231 individuals. 47. Animals are MISCLA, SSIFIED. 3 citizens are duplicated. 11 addresses are fictitious or misplaced. But the bigger surprise is that, despite all the gaps and errors, the overall population of Rome has increased by a few hundred souls. People have returned. Babies have been born. Freedmen have settled in corners the census never reached. Rome grows, even when no one is watching. A senior clerk makes a dry observation. The empire expands, even in the margins. You're tasked with drafting the reconciliation report. You do so carefully, using fresh parchment and your best ink. You write each number slowly, as though pressing order into the chaos of the city. Quiet between the scrolls that evening, you find yourself in the record cloister, a long, dim chamber where the oldest census scrolls are stored. Some are so fragile that even unrolling them requires a priest's blessing and a feather brush. You browse the older lists, not by instruction, but out of curiosity. A census from the time of Tiberius lists an entire family of 11 who lived in a single flat in Region X. All their names are there. Deus, Domitia, little Cornelia, twins named after vegetables. Even the name of a pet tortoise, Sparius. You wonder if they knew they'd still exist on paper 2 generations later. You wonder if anyone cared at the time. One scroll notes simply, house abandoned. Chickens remain. You smile at that. A small truth in a vast machine. A brief argument about mules later. In the dining hall shared by the scribes, you overhear an argument. A young clerk insists that mules should be listed under livestock hybrid. An older clerk grumbles. They don't breed. Can't be livestock, but they're not pets either. They carry things. So do some children. You leave them to it. You've already seen what happens when you try to classify a mule with a grudge. The scroll you will never finish before bed. You take out your personal tablet of habit you picked up years ago. On it, you've kept a private census, not of people, not of goats, but of moments. You read through a few. Day 8. Woman insists her cat is a priest. Possibly true. Day 16. House with 11 residents, 0 chairs. Day 29. Man with 5 names, none real. Day 42. Chicken reappears. Maybe reincarnated. You had today's note. Day 50. Audit complete. City imperfect. Records mostly true. Possibly enough. You close the tablet. Blow out the lamp. The city that only exists on paper as you lie in bed, listening to the distant sounds of Rome settling into sleep. You think again of the Empire scrolls. They tell a story no statue can. A story of names, of borrowed walls, of rented roofs, of shared staircases and vanishing relatives. They tell of chickens with tags and widows who name them, of children growing in unrecorded corners, of mules with opinions, of scribes with aching fingers. The census is not perfect, but it is faithful, and that is enough, because to count something is to say it mattered even just for a moment. Even if it is later forgotten, you close your eyes, and somewhere in the archives, your scrolls sleep too, curled and sealed waiting, but then a final thought lingers like a soft whisper against your closing mind. How many lives were never recorded? How many names never scratched into wax or ink? Do they still echo between the scrolls? Or have they disappeared forever into the silence of time? Story 3. Washing dishes in Edo, Japan. A slow soap opera section 1. Bowls. Silence and the smell of bamboo water. You wake before the lanterns are lit. The sky outside your small window is pale and wet, like paper soaked once and left to dry. It is quiet. You can hear the wind from the river, the soft creak of wood, and the faintest clatter from a neighbor's tea kettle. You are in Edo, capital of the Tokugawa shogunate, seat of the shogun, a city swelling with rice merchants, scribes, samurai, gamblers, monks, and midwives. And you are none of these. You wash dishes, not at a temple, not in the kitchens of a feudal lord, but in the rear courtyard of a Ryotean upscale dining house, tucked behind a tea pavilion near the Sumida River. You are one of the invisible, people who keep the elegance of Edo afloat, and your work begins with water. The morning. Soak. You step outside into the kitchen courtyard. Your first task, fill the soaking tub. It's an old wooden barrel, blackened with years of heat and oil. You draw water from a well using a bamboo pail. The rope is stiff with cold, your fingers numb by the third pull. You pour the water into the tub, listening to the hollow splash. As it hits yesterday's pile and avalanche of bowls, plates, chopsticks, lacquered trays, soup lids, and small porcelain sauce dishes stained with soy and pickled plum. You add ash powder ground from burnt, rice husks and citrus peel, and stir the mixture with a paddle until it clouds. There is no soap in Edo, not in the modern sense. Cleanliness. Here is friction, time, and ritual. You do not rush. The soaking is sacred. The older dishwashers say, if you listen closely, you can hear the bowls releasing yesterday's conversation. You believe them. A house of quiet spoons, the Ryote you work for is called Hisagoen, the gourd pavilion. It is neither the largest nor the most expensive in Edo, but it is old and respected. A few daimyo have dined here. One of them once forgot his sandals. Your master is a man named Oisan. He is short, fussy, and speaks rarely, except when complaining about the water temperature or the angle of a cleaned rice bowl. Oi-san does not like things washed too quickly, nor too slowly. He despises soap bubbles and insists on drying everything with cloths that smell faintly of camellia oil. You nod at him in the morning. He nods back. It is enough that the kitchen workers are already chopping burdock root and rehydrating dried shiitake. A delivery boy arrives with tofu, and someone begins steaming rice in a wooden vat the size of a barrel. You remain in your corner. Your world is the dish pit. Tools of the trade you. Sort the dishes into piles. Rice bowls first, then soup bowls. Then chowan, teacups, then kobachi, side dishes. Trays and lids are last. You count out your cloths. 3 coarse towels for scrubbing, 2 finer ones for drying, and 1 for your hands. A long-handled brush sits beside your bench. Its bristles are made of bundled hemp, worn soft with use. You soak it in the ash water and begin. Each bowl is inspected before washing. Chips are noted. Cracks set aside. If a lacquer piece is damaged, it must be returned to the craftsman who made it, along with a formal apology, written in your master's name. You scrub slowly. Methodically. The goal is not just clean. It is restored as if the dish had never held food. Your hands grow warm in the bucket. Your breath fogs in the morning air. You fall into rhythm. Soak, scrub, rinse, dry. It is boring. It is perfect. Thoughts while washing as your hands move. Your mind wanders. You think of the man last night who slurped soup like a peasant but wore a silk robe lined with fox fur. You wonder if his wealth tastes different from yours. You remember a tray you once dropped in your first week. It was red lacquer, trimmed with gold. You had to write an apology. You wrote slowly, brush shaking, the paper damp with your sweat. Still think about that tray. You wonder how many hands have touched the bowl you're holding. A geisha? A monk? A samurai who never draws his sword? You turn the bowl slowly in the rinse water. A drop of soy clings to the rim like a thought. You wipe it away. The rules of cleanliness in Edo. Cleanliness is not only personal, it is political. The Tokugawa regime has declared it a civic virtue. Streets are swept daily. Bathhouses are common. Vendors rinse their stalls. Even beggars carry scraps of cloth to wipe their hands. Filth, they say, invites disorder. Disorder invites rebellion. You are not a philosopher, but you understand the logic. In the dish room, cleanliness is stricter. Still, if a guest finds a grain of old rice under a bowl, the house loses face. If a lid is placed on the wrong soup, Oi-san curses softly in his throat for hours. You live in a world where a bamboo skewer out of place is a scandal. And you find it oddly comforting. There is no chaos in the dish room. Only protocol. Midday. The surge at noon. The first course is over. This is when the avalanche comes. A kitchen boy appears, carrying a tray as wide as a door. It bears dozens of used dishes, some still steaming, others already dry. More trays follow, then bowls, then more lids. You receive them in silence. Stack them with care. Begin again. Soak, scrub, rinse, dry. Sometimes you forget your own name. In the repetition, sometimes you remember too much. You remember the sound of your mother's cooking pot, the way your uncle used to sharpen fish knives, the time your father returned from a sea voyage and brought home a wooden comb that smelled of the southern islands. You remember dropping that comb in a stream and crying so hard your grandfather carried you for hours. You scrub harder. The dishes don't care about your memories, but they hold them anyway. The soap. Opera of trays. Each tray you clean tells a story. This one has a faint perfume, probably handled by a courtesan. That one has scratches on the bottom. A restless hand, maybe an argument. One soup lid bears the tiniest lipstick print proof of a stolen kiss or a borrowed cosmetic. The stories are not yours to share, but you hold them briefly in your hands. You wipe them away, restore each piece. to perfect stillness, and let the memory vanish like steam in winter air. The drying rack in the wind. In the corner of the courtyard stands the drying rack bamboo poles strung across a frame, angled to catch the sun. You lay the dishes there gently. One by one the wind carries the scent of miso and green tea. The dishes shine in the light. You feel, for a moment, like a gardener of porcelain. End of the first half. As the sun climbs, your hands ache. The water is warmer now. You replace the ash, clean the tubs, and sharpen your brush on a whetstone. The second wave of dishes is coming. You stretch your back, glance at the kitchen, and drink a small cup of barley tea left by one of the cooks. You do not speak. You do not think too. Far ahead. You wash. You listen to the silence between splashes. Wonder, does anyone remember the hands that made the dishes shine? Or do they only remember the food that once filled them? Section 2. Ghost stains, forbiddens tea, and the missing soup lit afternoon in the Hesagoan dishyard begins not with a bell or a signal, but with the clatter of urgent footsteps. Someone, a server, probably has dropped a lacquer bowl. You hear it before you see it. The sharp talk of lacquer on stone, the intake of breath, and the quiet, dreadful silence that follows. You look up from your rinse bucket. A bowl, crimson red with a gold spiral rim, lies on its side, unbroken, miraculously. But you know what comes next. The inspection of the rim within moments. Oi-san is beside you. His hands are behind his back, his eyes unreadable. You've seen him assess broken bowls before. But this one is whole. He picks it up, turns it slowly, and finds it. A hairline chip on the underside of the rim, barely visible. But it is there. Without a word, he hands it to you. You bow your head. I will begin the repair slip, you say. He nods once and walks away. The bowl will be returned to the lacquerware master who made it, an aging artisan in Nihonbashi, who speaks rarely and charges precisely what he wants. The repair will take 4 months. The apology letter must be handwritten. You will be asked to rewrite it 5 times, all for a chip no one can see unless they know where to look. But that's the rule. That's Edo, a stain that never leaves later. As you scrub a stack of teacups, you notice one with a ghost stain ring of darkness, barely there. Beneath the glazed dot, it's not food. It's not mold. It's something else. Some dishes hold on to. They're past. Even after boiling water, rice ash, citrus peel, and 3 full rinses, the memory remains. Not visibly, not physically, but emotionally. You don't mark it for disposal. You don't call oi-san. Instead, you wash it gently, as if apologizing for some old grief. You place it on the rack to dry. The wind rustles the bamboo poles. The stain seems fainter in the light. You let it go. The protocol of the soup lids by mid-afternoon. Your hands are raw and your arms sore. Then comes the tray dot. It's carried by a small server boy, with nervous eyes and crooked sleeves. He bows too low, nearly spills the contents, and then rushes off without explanation. You begin sorting the dishes, stacking the kobashi in one pile, teacups in another, rice bowls to the left, and then you realize it. One of the soup lids is missing. It is always recorded. 10 bowls, 10 lids. Always. You double-check the tray. You recount the stack. You even check under the sink basin. Nothing. Nothing. You feel a slight pressure in your chest. Not panic, but a rising tide of unease. The missing lid is not just a mistake. It is an offense. Each dish in the ryote is part of a set, sometimes over 200 years old. Missing one lid could throw off the aesthetic balance of a banquet tray. You approach Oi-san carefully. He listens. He does not blink. He simply nods and says, "Find it." And so you begin. A dish detective, you retrace the server's route through the outer kitchen, past Rice steamer. Behind the grilled eel station. You check the wash bucket. The trash pile. Even the gutter by the water trough. Nothing. Finally. You go where you are not allowed. The guest chambers. You remove your sandals. Step softly onto the tatami. The air is cooler here, perfumed faintly with plum blossom incense. You follow the sound of a hostess singing gently behind a screen. And there, in a darkened alcove, beside a forgotten sake flask, the lid, black lacquer with a white inlay of pine needles, lying quietly on its side like a cat that wandered off for a nap. You pick it up. Bow to the room. And leave. No one sees you. You are a dishwasher. You are not meant to be seen. But you have restored the set. Forbidden tea after that. A gift arrives, not a formal one. Not an envelope or coin. Just a small cup of sencha, left near your basin. From who you do not know. The dish staff are not allowed tea during work. It is considered too precious. Tea is for guests, for poets, for samurai waiting in silence. You look around. No one watches. You drink. The flavor is grassy and bitter and startlingly warm. It reaches the cold corners of your chest. For a moment, you forget the missing lid, the chipped bowl, the stain that wouldn't vanish. You feel clean. The things that stay in the late afternoon. The second wash cycle slows. Fewer trays arrive. The kitchen noise fades into preparation. For the evening seating, the sky turns amber. The stones of the courtyard begin to sweat again with humidity. You use this time to clean the tools themselves. Brushes are washed, towels hung, buckets drained and dried. You oil the wood of your bench with a rag soaked in persimmon seed. And you do one final check of the drying rack. The dishes gleam in the fading light. You lift a tea bowl and hold it to the sky. Its glaze catches the sun like water rippling on a pond. You think of all the lips that have touched its rim, all the stories it has overheard, all the silence it has held. You wonder, do dishes remember us? Or do we simply pretend they do, so we feel less forgotten? You return it to the rack. It does not answer. After the washing by sundown, the hisago is quiet again. You change into a clean tunic. You sweep the dish yard one final time. You write the day's dish tally in a thin scroll. 142 bowls, 103 cups, 67 trays, 1 cracked, 1 lost, found. You sign your name. Small, discreet. You bow to Oisan, who grunts. You walk home through streets that smell of pine smoke and river mud. The meaning of repetition. That night, as you wash your own cup at home coarse clay, a gift from your cousin, you reflect on the day. You handle dishes that cost more than your entire annual wage. You restored a missing lid. You drank tea meant for nobles. You returned a chipped bowl to the cycle of repair and redemption. And yet, the day was just like all the others. Soak, scrub, rinse, dry. And again tomorrow. But you understand something. Now, repetition is not meaningless. It is intimacy. You do not know the guests, but you know their bowls, their habits, their way of drinking. You know how the lacquer feels when it's ready. You know when a tray is lonely. You do not speak, but you listen to the bowls, to the water, to the silence. That, too, is a kind of history. But one question still lingers like steam from a teacup. If no one ever sees you, if no one ever says your name, are you still part of the story? Or do you vanish like the stains you scrub away? Section 3. The crack that wasn't, and the dish that disappeared. You arrive early. The sky is still dark. A chill clings to the stones of the dish courtyard like moss. You light a small oil lamp and sit on the low bench, your knees folded beneath. You listening to the soft creaks of the kitchen roof waking up. Today is the last day of the 5th moon, a calendar note that means little to most. But for the Ryote, It marks the end of a seasonal menu. That means a full house of guests, a 10-course banquet, and a flood of trays. You flex your hands. Dip them into a bowl of warm water. The bones complain. You've been washing dishes since before some of the new servers were born. Today, it feels like you always have, and maybe always will. The bowl, with no owner your first delivery of the day, comes not from the kitchen, but from the front gate. The night watchman, an elderly man who walks like a swaying lantern, holds out a covered tray. Left outside the gate, he says, before sunrise. With this note, you take the note and bow. It is written on thin, crinkled mulberry paper. This belonged here, I think. It remembers better than I do. -K. You lift the lid. Inside is a single bowl, lacquered black with an interior swirl, of gold and ochre. You recognize the style an older artisan, probably Kyoto school. The rim bears the faintest line of repaired kintsugi gold-seamed ceramic, the art of embracing brokenness. But the bowl is not on any inventory list. You bring it to Oi-san. He stares at it, turns it, hums once. Perhaps it was ours once, he says. Perhaps not, but it is beautiful. You are told to wash it. And so you do carefully, reverently, feeling the faint grooves in the gold line like a path worn by water. There is no stain, no grease. But still, you clean it. Dish quarantined during the midday rush. You notice something strange. A stack of side plates, blue porcelain with a reed pattern, has gone untouched. Not one returned from the kitchen. Not one added to the soiled pile. Ask a server. He frowns. They weren't used? But they were set? Yes, all 10. You check the kitchen. Ask the head cook. Ask Oi-san. Each gives the same shrug. Not today. The plates sit stacked in the dish room, perfect and patient. You look at them for a long time. 10 dishes that were prepared for a meal that never came. And somehow, that feels heavier than the piles. You're still scrubbing. The crack that wasn't mid-afternoon. A guest sends back a rice bowl with a complaint. The host claims to have heard a crack while eating. Not seen, just heard. You inspect it. You tap it with your fingernail. It rings perfectly. No visible flaw, but the crack, real or imagined, has made the bowl unusable. That is Edo hospitality. A perceived imperfection is an actual imperfection. Oi-san sighs. The bowl is removed from circulation. You wrap it in soft cloth and place it on the shelf for damaged wear. It joins a pile of other almost perfect things. A chipped cup, a tray with uneven grain, a lid that lost its pair. You whisper a quiet apology. The bowl will never serve rice again. But in your hands, it still feels warm. The apprentice who asked a new kitchen boy, barely tall enough to reach the steamer, comes to you during the lull. Before dinner, he watches you wash dishes. Then, shyly, he asks, "Why don't you ever go out front?" You pause. He continues. The guests eat. They leave full. But they never see you. Don't you want to know if they liked the food? You smile at that. It doesn't matter, you say. The dish knows. He looks confused. You hold up a rinsed lacquer soup bowl, catching the light. If the guest finishes it, the dish feels empty. That's praise. If food remains, the weight is uneven. That's criticism. He stares harder. You chuckle softly. One day, you'll hear it too. The last rush evening comes like a whispered command. The banquet begins. Trays arrive stacked high, layer upon layer of polished wood and fine porcelain. You wash, you rinse, you dry. Steam rises. The air smells of salt and vinegar and citrus peel. Water splashes onto your sleeves, your lap, your hair. You scrub faster, not frantic, but certain. This is your rhythm. You hear laughter from the guest rooms, distant koto music, the clink of toasts, and always, behind it all, the quiet heartbeat of the dish. Pit.soak, scrub, rinse, dry. Again, and again. The guest who remembered near the end of the evening. A guest sends something back, not a complaint, but a message. A folded paper, tied to a tray. You are summoned to read it. It says, I visited Hisago 20 years ago when I was just a boy. I remember the lacquer bowls. They were cleaner than the moon. I always wondered who made them shine. There is no name, just a pressed chrysanthemum petal inside. You hold it in your palm for a long time, then place it in your pocket. No one sees. No. One needs to. The dishes sleep after the guests have gone. After the final bowl is dried and stacked, after the kitchen is swept and the stove coals have died down, you remain for one last task. You wash the new old bowl again. The one left at the gate. You dry it with camellia-scented cloth, and you place it at the front of the shelf, facing the others. A silent re-entry, like a forgotten name remembered at last. The story. Beneath the glaze you walk home, beneath the sky full of stars. The street is quiet. The river whispers. In your satchel is the paper. Note. In your sleeves, the scent of ash and citrus. In your hands, a quiet ache that has never really left. And in your heart, something harder to name. You have washed thousands of dishes. You will wash thousands more. But each one was a moment, a held silence, a vanished stain, a whisper of someone's. Meal. People forget names. They forget servers. They forget who brought the towels, who scrubbed the bowls, who balanced the soup lids. Just right. But dishes remember, even when they are broken, even when they are mended, even when no one looks at them. Twice. Story 4. The life of a monastic laundry clerk. Stains, scrolls, and silent scrubbing. Section 1. Soaproot, steam, and the robes of the abbey. You rise with the toll of the third bell before dawn, before breakfast, before even the first psalm is read aloud in the chapel. The air in the monastery is cold and quiet. Stone walls sweat with the night's condensation. Your sandals make soft tapping sounds on the worn flagstone as you walk past the cloister garden, down a narrow passage, and into your world, the laundry house. Not the scriptorium, where monks bend over illuminated manuscripts. Not the kitchen, with its rhythmic chopping and bubbling stews. Not even the chapel, where incense dances in golden shafts of morning light. No, you belong here, among the buckets, basins, scrub boards, and drying ropes. You are the laundry clerk, and your day begins with water. The suds before sunrise. Your first task is to heat the cauldron. A massive copper vessel sits on a fire grate near the rear wall. You scoop kindling into the base and strike flint until the dry twigs catch. The fire blooms with a slow orange pulse. Soon, the heat licks the belly of the pot. You pour in bucket after bucket of well water-cold, iron-heavy, and watch your breath hang in the air above the rising steam. Into the water. You add soapwort or root, dried and pounded into a gray powder, used since Roman times. No perfumed soaps here. Just suds that smell faintly of earth and bitter leaves. It is enough. You stir slowly with a wooden paddle as steam unfurls like a silent hymn. The stone walls warm by degrees. Robes, tunics, and a drawer of labels. The abbey is home to 41 monks, 9 novices, and 3 lay brothers. Each has 2 robes, one worn, one washed. On any given day, that means dozens of garments pass through your hands. The robes are mostly undyed wool gray or off-white, depending on the season and the sheep. The older robes are rough, sometimes mended, patched, or thinned from decades of wear. Every robe has a cloth tag sewn to the hem with an inked letter and number. You invented this system. Brother A1 is Brother Aldhelm. Brother N7 is Novice Norbert. Brother T5 is a recent transfer from the priory downriver nervous, pale, and prone to NOSEB, LEEDS. The tags unnecessary. Otherwise, the robes would become a holy mess. Once, before your time, a monk wore the wrong robe to Mass. It had a tear in the sleeve. An argument followed, then penance, then silence. You don't intend to let that happen again. Scrubbing is meditation. When the water is ready, you begin. You lower the robes, one by one, into the hot basin. You knead and swirl, squeeze and rinse. Then move to the scrubbing bench, where coarse cloths and worn brushes wait. The worst stains come from ink and wax. The scribes are careful, but not perfect. A smudge from a quill can ruin a sleeve. They wax from altar candles' leaves, pale spots on hoods and hems. More troubling are the mysterious stains, green smudges that might be from herbs, brown ones that might be stew. You never ask. You scrub in silence. The rhythm is your prayer. Push, pull, rinse. Press. The stone trough beside you catches the dirty water. A channel carved in the floor leads it out to the abbey garden, where it nourishes the nettles and root vegetables. Even the water serves a second life. Unspoken hierarchy of laundry. Not all robes are equal. The abbot's robe is washed by hand, by you alone, and dried flat on a clean wooden screen away from the common line. His wool is finer, the stitching straighter. You have never met the man's eye, but you've washed the back of his neck 100 times. The choir monks receive second priority, those who sing the daily hours and perform the Mass. Their robes must be spotless. Stains here are an affront to divine order. Lay brothers who do most of the farm and kitchen work wear coarser robes. You do your best, but sometimes their garments return with soil, so embedded that even boiling won't remove it. You patch what you can. Some robes carry entire histories in the weave. You've seen tears in the elbow from fieldwork, burns on the hem from the hearth, and one memorable robe with a feather stuck permanently in the collar. No one has claimed responsibility. You leave. Get the whispering rope outside. A long drying rope stretches between the abbey wall and the herb shed. Today it sags low under the weight of damp wool. You pin each robe carefully. Winged flutters their sleeves like silent greetings. In the morning sun, the cloth steams gently, as though exhaling. It is during these quiet moments that you think the most about Brother Cadwal, who hums while copying Psalms. About Novice N7, who smells of mint and vinegar. About the robe you found last week with a single strand of blonde hair caught in the seam. You never asked. You never will. A scroll of stains beside your bench is your record scroll, not for scriptures, but for stains. You created it yourself. Each entry lists the garment ID, the date, and any notable notes. A 3, May 5th. Wax on right sleeve B6, April 29th. Berry stain, possibly elderberry. T5, April 21st. Unidentified blot, ink-like, smells faintly of fish C2. Ongoing. Mud on hem, never fully removed. You keep this scroll not out of vanity, but for consistency. If the same monk returns with the same stain, you will gently suggest they reconsider their posture at the soup table. Once, a visiting bishop saw your scroll and laughed. "You're the abbot of stains," he said. You bowed. He wasn't wrong. Novice's secret near midday. Novice Norbert appears in the doorway, sheepish. He holds out a folded tunic. "I drop stew," he says, eyes downcast. You take it. Unfold it. It is not stew. It is red ink, spilled across the front like a painter's mistake. The sort of ink used for rubrication, the sacred red script in manuscripts. You raise your eyebrow. Norbert flushes. "It was after hours," he mumbles. "I was only practicing. I didn't mean to take the ink." You say nothing. Just now. You soak the tunic. Scrub with care. Most of the stain lifts. Some remains. Later, you find a tiny slip of parchment in the pocket. Lord, forgive me, but let me keep learning. You burn it gently in the laundry fire. Some ink is meant to stain. The robe that disappeared before Vespers. You conduct your inventory. Every robe returned. Every tunic washed. Every towel hung. Except one. C7. Gone. You double-check the pile. Recount the tags. Search the drying line. Nothing. C7 is Brother Cillian. A quiet monk. One who rarely speaks. You check his sleeping cell. Empty. His boots are gone. His shelf is bare. You do not ask questions aloud, but you feel the weight of it. Later that evening, the abbot announces that Brother Cillian has departed for silence. Phrase used when a monk leaves without permission or reason. You remove C7 from your scroll, but you do not remove his tag. You pin it quietly to the inside of the laundry chest. A reminder, even when we go, a part of us remains in the weave. Evening. Falls the last of the robes dry. The cauldron cools. The ropes go still. You brush off your bench. Stack the basins. Fold your cloths. Another day's worth of silent labor, gone like steam. You mark the final line on your scroll. May 31st to 42 robes washed. One vanished. Soap root. Nearly out. You extinguish the lamp. Close the door. And as you walk past the cloister garden, a final thought echoes like the drip of water from a drying rope. What if the holiest work was never sung in chapel, but scrubbed quietly in the corner of a stone-walled room? Section 2. Candle grease, confession towels, and the scent of soap-roothed day begins not with the bell, but with smoke. You arrive at the laundry house to find the scent of burnt wool in the air. A single thin thread of gray rises from the fire. Great, not a blaze, just a scorch. Enough to ruin the bottom hem of one robe. Left too close to the cauldron's edge. You pull it back with the hooked end of your paddle. The damage is minimal. A black singe about 2 fingers wide. You sigh. You already know the robe's tag. B2, Brother Benedict. Again, you mentally add another line to the scroll. The rules of fabric and flame. The monastery's robes are wool, a choice not made for comfort, but for austerity. Wool breathes in summer, insulates in winter, and absorbs sweat, oil, and ash with grim loyalty. It also burns easily. There are strict rules. No robes hung within 3 feet of the fire grate. No wool placed directly on stone. No drying during the height of the noon sun, lest the cloth warp and shrink. You've enforced these rules for years, but someone always forgets. Usually Brother Benedict. You'll speak with him later, kindly, quietly, as you always do. The suds and the psalter mid-morning, the monks begin chanting terce. The 3rd hour. Their voices float into the laundry house, echoing off the stone like breath in a basin. As they chant psalms, you scrub. The rhythm aligns. The verses, repetitive and calm, match the movement of your hands. Push, pull, press, lift. You hear, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. And smile. There's poetry in this labor, if you listen long enough. Candle grease and candle secrets. Abbey uses beeswax candles for all its services. Clean burning, soft yellow, and fragrant if you can afford them. Which, thankfully, this monastery can. But candle grease is persistent. This morning, you find a robe hood stiffened with wax hardened. Into the wool like old sap. You recognize the tag. G4. You sigh again. G4 is Brother Gregor, a kind man who leans too close when lighting the altar tapers. You place the robe into a separate bucket. Grease must be coaxed, not scrubbed. You add a pinch of ground chalk, a splash of hot vinegar, and wait. The trick is time. As it soaks, you examine the wax splatter, the shape of it, the splashes and drip marks. It almost looks like a map rivers branching out, little deltas of yellow-white. For a moment, you wonder if the wax is trying to tell you something. Then you blink, and the map is just wax again. You gently press it beneath warm cloth. The wax vanishes like a secret forgiven. The guest. Robes A message arrives at midday. 2 visiting friars will be staying the night. You prepare 2 guest robes. They are finer than most smooth wool, lined faintly with linen, stored in cedar chests, only used 3 times a year. You retrieve them with reverence, air them in the cloister garden, shake out the stiffness of months, brush the collars with a palm-sized stone to loosen the creases, and then you fold them precisely 3 folds left, 2 right, tuck the sleeves beneath like wings, and place them in the guest dormitory. They may not notice, but if they do, they will feel welcome. And that is enough. The confession towels. This afternoon is for toweling. Each monk is allowed 2 towels, 1 for washing, 1 for confession. The confession towel is rarely soiled, but never forgotten. It is held in the lap during private penance, sometimes clutched, sometimes soaked with tears. You handle these towels gently. You do not rush them. Some stains cannot be named, some cannot be removed, and that is all right. You wash and rinse and hang them in the cloister breeze. 1 towel bears a single red thread, a repair you made yourself weeks ago. You smile at it now. It has held. The cloth remembers. A visit from the herbalist near the end of the day. Sister Hildegund arrives. She is from the infirmary house down the path. A woman of wide hands and narrow eyes. She carries a basket filled with fresh soaproot, lye ash, and herbs. We're out of the mint bundles, she says. But I brought extra yarrow. You thank her. Offer tea. She stays a moment. Together, you crush the soaproot roots dried and pound it into powder. She shows you a new blend: rosemary, lemon balm, and wood ash. It smells like memory, she says. You nod. It smells like someone else's childhood. You do not ask whose. A letter hidden in a tunic late in the afternoon. As you sort the worn tunics of the lay brothers, you find something tucked into a seam. Not a note, not a prayer, but a tiny scroll of flax string, wound tightly and tied in a knot. You recognize the fabric. This belongs to T5, the young monk from the priory downriver. Curious. You unwind the string. Inside, a thread of green-dyed wool, a pebble, and a sliver of pressed sage leaf. No words. Just objects, a message, a ritual, a memory. You rewrap it, leave it in the tunic's pocket. Whatever it means, it was meant to be held, not read. Twilight folding as the sun sets, the drying rope sways. The robes are ready. You fold each one with practiced care. Left sleeve, right sleeve, waist crease, bottom hem tucked inward. You stack them on the bench. Tag side up, B1, B2, B3, C7 is still missing. You leave a space. Just in case. The prayer of cloth. You finish by folding the abbot's robe. It is soft. Old, repaired with gold thread once, near the shoulder. You smooth the fold. And speak, not aloud, but in your thoughts. May those who wear these robes do no harm. May their sleeves carry kindness. May the threads not fray too soon. And as the final robe is placed gently in the chest, one question rises like a last curl of steam from the basin. If the stains come back again and again, is that failure or faithfulness? Section 3. The unraveled thread and the last clean robe. It is raining. A soft, steady rain that seeps into the monastery stones, turns the garden paths to mud, and drips from the cloister arches like a metronome. You light the fire. In the laundry house slowly this morning. The kindling is damp, and the flame needs coaxing. The copper cauldron creaks as it fills. The steam rises slower in cold weather. Hugging the air like a shawl. Rain is not your enemy. Rain means fewer robes are worn outside, fewer grass stains, less ash from the altar blowing in the wind, fewer visits to the outer grounds, and thus fewer splashes of unnamable filth. But it also means nothing will dry. The ropes outside droop under the weight of yesterday's robes. Still damp, still waiting. You sigh, wrap a wool shawl over your shoulders, and get to work. The robe with the unraveled seam, your first task is to inspect the robe returned late last night from the infirmary. Tag L3. Brother Laurentius. He rarely appears in the chapel these days. Too ill to kneel, too frail to eat in the refectory. His robe arrives in a wicker basket with a note pinned to the collar. He fell asleep during prayer, spilled broth, apologized twice. You smile faintly. You remember when Laurentius was still strong enough to help stir the fire in your cauldron. The robe is stained, yes, but that is not what draws your attention. A seam near the chest has come loose. Not torn, just relaxed, as though the robe itself is tired. You thread a needle. Choose flax thread, soft enough for old cloth. You stitch the seam slowly. One loop for every breath. One breath for every remembered kindness. The monk who returned before. Noon, a knock. You open the laundry door to find a figure wrapped in a sodden cloak. He removes the hood. Brother CILLIN. Tag C7. The monk who disappeared. His face is pale but calm. His hands tremble slightly. He carries a small cloth bundle tied with a length of straw cord. He says nothing. He simply hands you the bundle, bows, and walks off toward the chapel. Inside the bundle, one robe, one tunic, one pair of worn sandals, one letter, unsigned. You do not read it. You untie the bundle. And begin the wash. The robe is stiff with cold and smells faintly of pine and travel. You soak it gently. There is a rip along the hem repaired with clumsy thread. You smile. He tried. You add his tag. C7 back to the scroll. No robe is lost forever. The linen inventory. After midday meal, the lay brother from the infirmary arrives with a cart. Inside. Soiled linens. Bedcloths, face cloths, and towels used by the sick. Some stained, some still warm. He says, the young one passed last night. The smallest bed sheet is no longer needed. He says it softly. You nod. You take. The linens. Sort them by fabric. Oil what you must. Burn one that cannot be salvaged, not out of disrespect, but because some cloth is not meant to be used. Again, later, you find a single violet petal in the hem of one pillow cover. You do not know who left it. You place it on your shelf. Let it dry. Thread jar. In the corner of the laundry room is your jar of leftover threads. A cracked clay pot filled with hundreds of tiny strands from decades of repairs. Blue from novice belts. Red from altar cloths. White from guest tunics. Golden thread from the abbot's robe. Today, you add one more. The frayed end from Brother Cillian's hem. You wind it around your finger first. And drop it in the jar. The jar is not beautiful, but it remembers. A robe with no tag in the mid-afternoon. Quiet, a tray arrives, not a laundry basket. A tray carried by the kitchen steward. It holds a single robe, folded neatly. Still warm. But no tag. You inspect it. The stitching is older. The wool softer than most. The collar embroidered faintly with a faded symbol, a lily or a flame. You do not recognize it. You check your scroll. No match. You ask Oisan, who manages. Records. He frowns. This robe hasn't been worn here in years. Perhaps a retired brother sent it back. Perhaps. Or perhaps it simply came home. You wash it. Lightly. You dry it indoors. You fold it without a name. And you hang it on the wall peg above the laundry scroll, where it will wait for someone who remembers it. The dyers visit just before. Vespers, the textile dyer arrives. He comes every third month to re-dye the black cords and dark hoods that fade under sun and wear. He brings a satchel of crushed indigo and a jug of vinegar mordant dot. You prepare the dye basin. He soaks the cords, stirs them, lifts them like vines from the deep dot as he works. He tells you, the color clings best when the fabric has been worn in. The new cloth always rejects the dye at first, but the used ones, they drink it right in. You nod dot, it is the same with robes. The longer they've served, the more faithfully they absorb what's offered. The final robe evening falls. The rope lines sag under drying wool. The steam has long since faded. The cauldron is empty. You count the robes dot all present, all tagged dot all folded dot, and yet one robe remains. UNWORN dot the extra. The guest robe, ironed and prepared for the visiting friar, who never arrived, dot it hangs there. Crisp and quiet, never having touched a back or heard a prayer. You refold it, place it in the cedar chest, leave a note, unworn, but waiting. Some robes, like some stories, are kept ready in hope. Dot your own robe before sleep. You wash your own robe. You do not do this often, dot. It is worn thin at the elbows, patched twice at the waist, but it is yours. You soak it gently. Scrub. The cuffs. Rinse it in cold water, dot. You hang it by the fire, not too close, and wait, dot, in the quiet. You sit with a cup of barley tea, and your laundry scroll, you add a final line. June 1st to 44 robes washed. One returned, one remembered. Soap root restocked. You place the scroll in the box. You blow out the lamp, and step into the evening rain, dot the robes sleep. The threads are quiet. The water has cooled, dot you wonder, if no one saw the robes, would they still carry the weight of devotion? If no one heard the scrubbing, would the prayers still rise like steam? And somewhere, deep in the folds of a newly mended robe, a single thread whispers back, yes, always, even if no one sees. Story 5. A day in the Ottoman public bathhouse. Towels, steam, and secret deals section 1. The marble echoes and mourning buckets you wait before the call to prayer. Not to pray, but to pour water, dot. Your job begins long before the customers arrive, before the steam rises, before the marble floors warm to bare feet. You are the nader's apprentice, not yet trusted with the massage oil or the special cloths, but given the buckets, the brooms, and the keys to the fire chamber. You step into your sandals, wrap your coarse towel tightly around your waist, and walk the narrow alley toward the hammam, the Ottoman public bathhouse at the edge of the bazaar. The city is still quiet. The pigeons coo in the eaves. The scent of last night's bread still clings to the air. But in the hammam, heat is already rising, and your day has just begun. The furnace room in the belly stone, you enter through the back, where the farink, the firekeeper, has already stoked the hearth. The kolhan, a great brick furnace, sits directly beneath the gogek tasi, the large central marble slab that forms the heart of the bath. The system is simple. Water tanks above the flames, clay pipes through the walls, and marble that holds. Heat like a sleeping animal, but it must be fed constantly. You shovel charcoal into the mouth of the furnace, watching the red glow flare to life. The heat licks the pipes. You feel the breath of it rising into the hammam's chambers above. Soon, the marble belly stone will be hot enough to lie on without flinching. Soon, the clients will arrive. But first buckets, the buckets of water, is drawn from 2 cisterns, cold from the northern tank, hot from the southern, heated by the furnace below. You carry brass buckets heavy, with wooden handles, and pour them into the ceramic basins of the skaklik, the main hot room. Each basin or kurna must be filled with a mixture of both hot and cold, just enough to steam gently, but not scald. You test the water by dipping in your elbow. That's how the older nator taught you. Elbow skin, she says, doesn't lie. You do. This 12 times, one for each basin. Each bucket is a little heavier than the last. You sweat already, though the sun is barely above the minarets. But this is the cost of clean skin and warm marble, the soap and the strigil once the basins are filled. You prepare the tools. Sabon olive oil soap, grated and mixed with rosewater. Telek kasesi, exfoliating mitts, hung to dry overnight. Tas bowls, wide-handled, bowls for pouring water over heads and shoulders. Strigils, bronze scrapers, rare now, mostly used by older men nostalgic for Roman customs. Each item is lined up on the shelf outside the changing room. You count them twice, then again. Clients notice when their soak smells faint or their bowl leaks. This is a bathhouse. Yes, but also a social court, a gossip circle, a healing ward, and a negotiation chamber. Every item must be in its place, every towel folded, just so. Every bowl shining like a mirror. The first guest, merchant with calloused feet, the first guest, arrives just after dawn. A spice merchant, whose sandals are warm to the sole, and who always requests extra hot water. He leaves his coin at the counter, folds his outer garments with care, and wraps himself in the pestimula checkered towel. You escort him to his usual basin, pour 3 bowls over his head, and step back. He begins his routine, scrubbing arms, humming, muttering about caravan. Prices. You kneel and take his sandals to clean them while he bathes. You notice a small crack in one sole. You don't say anything, but tomorrow you'll have a leather patch ready. He won't ask for it, but he'll notice, and he'll return. The gossip steam by mid-morning. The Hammam hums. 5 basins occupied. The marble belly stone warm now holds 2 clients lying flat on their backs. Eyes closed, towels over their faces. Steam softens voices, but not enough. You hear it all. The vizier's son hasn't returned from Edirne. They say the silk shipments are stuck at the port. That widow from the stone quarter, she bathes twice a week now. The hammam is not merely for cleaning. It is where news is carried, softly and weightily, between strangers and friends. The stone hears it all. You do not repeat it, but you remember. And the marble does too. A missed step in the cool corridor between chambers. Someone has spilled water. You hear the fall before you see it. A young courier, slipping with a shout, landing hard on his side. He groans. You rush over. Help him sit. A bruise is already forming. You fetch a cloth, warm water, dab his shoulder. He shakes his head, embarrassed. I was late delivering a message, he mumbles. I thought if I could bathe quickly. You don't ask for details. Give him a bowl of warm soap water. He sits quietly. He soaks. He leaves an extra coin at the bench. Some things heal with time. Some with towels. Some with simply being allowed to sit and breathe. The invisible hands the clients come and go. Each has a rhythm. The tailor, who sings old love songs as he scrubs. The elderly widow, who uses more water than anyone else. The grumpy accountant, who always complains about the soap yet always returns. You refill the basins. You mop the marble steps. You restock towels, fold them again, and hang fresh pestimules on the hooks. No one notices you unless something is missing. But when everything runs smoothly, you become invisible. And in that invisibility, you find peace. The hidden door, while cleaning behind a stack of soap bowls, you notice something strange, a gap in the wall paneling. You press gently. It clicks. A narrow door swings open, not wide, but just enough to reveal a storage chamber behind the hot room. Dusty shelves, old linens, a pile of cracked tiles. And a bundle, wrapped in oilskin. You do not unwrap it. You close the door. Mark it in your mind. Perhaps it's only old cloth. Or perhaps It's something someone forgot, and someone else meant to stay hidden. You tell no one. Some. Doors stay shut, not even in a BATHHO. USE. The final. For the last guest of the morning asks you to pour water over his shoulders. He's old, tired, his back bent. You hold the tas bowl, fill it with hot water from the basin, and pour slowly 3 times. He exhales. You pour again, and he says, "It's the closest thing I've felt to forgiveness." You don't answer. You pour again, and think, maybe he's right. And as you mop the marble for the 100th time, you wonder what stories are soaked into the stone, waiting to be remembered, not shouted or carved, whispered, one drop at a time. Section 2. Coins in soap, ink on towels, and the art of vanishing. The afternoon sun filters through the colored glass windows of the Sakakuk, the bathhouse's cool room. Patterns of blue and gold fall across the tiles, mingling with the fading steam that seeps from the main chamber. You finished replacing the spent towels, and are scrubbing the marble ledge beneath the Kurna basins with effete surfaces. Are hundreds of people who pass through this place each year. Some come once, some come weekly, some leave nothing behind but heat. And yet, some leave stories, clues, small quiet marks in soap and shadow. You've been noticing them more. The soap that held a coinage begins with a bar of olive oil soap, cut fresh this morning, left on a shelf to dry, like always. But when you pick it up to set it near a basin, you feel a weight inside, unnatural, solid. You cut it open. Inside is a coin, silver, worn smooth. No inscription on either side. Strange. You show it to the nadir. She shrugs. Maybe someone was hiding it. She says, "You." Wonder, was it payment? A message? A mistake? You wash the coin clean. Leave it near the furnace, on the stone ledge. Just in case it was meant to be found again. A dispute beneath the steam late in the day. 2 men arrive together. One is a carpet merchant, well-fed, perfumed, wearing gold rings even while bathing. The other, a scribe, ink-stained fingers, eyes always scanning the corners. They pretend not to know each other, yet they bathe at the same basin. Sit close. Speak softly. And then voices rise. You said the song would be delivered before the prayer hour. And I told you the courier was delayed in Bursa. Then you lied. Steam curls between them, hiding their expressions. Stand nearby, pretending to mop. Their words grow sharper. One stands too quickly, water sloshing. The other reaches for his towel like a shield. And then they fall silent. They lock eyes. And just like that, the matter ends. They leave separately. But you find something later, hidden beneath the soap tray. A strip of vellum with 3 numbers inked neatly. You burn it. Some messages are not meant to be preserved. The ink-stained towel. That evening, as you gather the used towels for washing, you notice one with a peculiar mark. Not sweat, not dye. Ink. Dark, watery, soaked into the threads. At first, you think it's an accident, a scribe perhaps, who forgot to wash his hands. But then you look closer. The ink forms letters. Not in Turkish, not in Arabic. Latin. Barely legible, smeared from the steam, but still there. Et tas at fiat. You don't speak the tongue fluently, but you've heard the phrase before. Be silent, that it may happen. You set the towel aside. Tomorrow, it will be boiled with the others. The ink will fade, but the thought will stay. A hidden game in the cooling room. The Sakakuk is where guests go to cool down after the bath. There, they sip lemon water, recline on cushions, and gossip freely. Today, a game appears. Backgammon, wooden board, mother of pearl inlay. But the pieces are not ordinary. Each carved with symbols, not numbers. A lion, a hand, a tower. You recognize none of the players. They speak in low tones. Their movements are careful. Their laughter feels rehearsed. But what you notice most is this. They never look at the board when it's not their turn. They look at each other dot after they leave. The board is gone. The cushions neatly arranged. The smell of clove lingers faintly. You check the floor under the bench. One tile is slightly out of place. You press it. It shifts, but you do not lift it. Some games are meant to stay unfinished. The Hammam cat in the afternoon haze. A cat appears, orange, half a tail. One ear folded dot. It walks in without permission, steps onto the belly stone like it owns it, and stretches luxuriously in the center of the heat. You try to shoo it away dot. It ignores you completely. Later, you bring it a bowl of water and a crust of bread dot. It stares, then eats, then curls up in the corner near the soap shelf. Dot. The clients seem to accept its presence. One woman even calls it Saifa, healing. Perhaps it has always lived here. Perhaps it just knew when to arrive. The Ottoman, princess in disguise. Not every guest is who they appear to be. You learn this when an older woman arrives in plain robes. No jewelry, no attendants, no escort. But her hands are too smooth, her bearing too straight. She requests the hottest basin, and 2 towels, one red, one white. She says little, but after she leaves, the nader finds a small slip of silk beneath the water pitcher, embroidered with the tugra, the imperial monogram, the seal of the palace, a princess, or the sister of one. Maybe she came to escape the court, maybe to listen, maybe to meet someone. The towel she used is washed separately carefully with rose water. And lie, you hang it to dry alone on the inner line. Even silk, too, longs for warmth. Strange pairing just before sunset. 2 guests arrive, unusual in every way. One is a European man, German, you think. Clean-shaven, awkward in sandals, speaking Turkish slowly, with care. The other is a local imam, soft-voiced, gentle-eyed, his white beard trimmed neatly. They bathe together, talk at length. You catch only fragments. So the stars. Yes, they shift with the month, but not the hour. And the calendar, how do you record the cycles? They leave together, robes damp from steam, and something else conversation that mattered. You notice they leave no towels behind. Only a folded scrap of paper with astronomical sketches. You dry it carefully. Place it beneath your mat. Just in case. A quiet disappearance as the evening winds down. You notice something. A pair of sandals, small, leather-strapped, left by the basin since early morning. But no one has cleaned them. You ask the steward. Nader. Even the fire dash keeper. No. One remembers seeing the owner. You look through the register. No name matches. The sandals remain at the edge of the water, untouched. They are dry now. You take them and place them beside the bundle of soap with the hidden coin. Maybe they belong together. Maybe someone came to the bath not to cleanse, but to vanish. After the last guest you pour the final buckets. The steam has lifted. The belly stone now glows faintly from within, storing the last of the day's heat. The fire begins to die in the kolan. You sweep the soccer clock, fold the towels. Empty. The basins. Outside, the moon hangs low over the tile roofs. A call to prayer echoes softly, farther than usual. You sit on the marble ledge and exhale. So many came. So many left. And yet, only the stone remembers all. You wonder, as you stare at the flickering lantern by the water door. Are these stories? Washed away, or are they pressed deeper into the marble, waiting for someone to notice? Section 3. Steam's memory, and the final fold. It is nearly midnight, and the Hammam sleeps. The stone has cooled slightly, but the warmth lingers in the walls. An echo of a day spent in quiet service to strangers, travelers, traders, and shadows. You are still here, not by obligation, but by rhythm. Some jobs are not left behind at dusk. They stay in the hands, the breath, the soles of the feet. You move slowly, reverently among the tiled corridors. Finishing your last circuit, you light a small oil lamp. Its flame dances against the damp marble dot, and as you begin your final tasks, you reflect on the day, not just the soap, water, and basins, but the whispers, the hands that left no name, and the warm, wordless silences that lingered after. The discarded ring, you find it under the edge of the belly stone. A gold ring, small, plain. No engraving dot, it catches only the faintest light. Not dropped by accident, you're certain. A ring doesn't roll far on damp marble. And this one was placed, hidden in the crevice between two tiles. You pick it up, weigh it in your palm. Gold. Yes, but not fresh. Worn. You set it in the dish beside the missing coin and the pair of sandals. No one claimed. You have no names for any of them. Only this feeling that they are marks of intention. Someone meant to be forgotten. Someone meant to be found. The unclaimed message you return to the hidden storage room behind the soap shelf. Open the panel. Step inside. The air is still. You kneel and untie the bundle left in oilskin. Inside, a small scroll, delicately inked in Arabic script with smooth, curling strokes. The kind used not for contracts or prayer, but for poetry. You do not read aloud, but you trace the opening line with your finger. My name is not needed. Only the steam remembers me. The rest is a poem. A farewell, perhaps. A confession or a promise. It ends with a date. 7 years ago. You carefully wrap the scroll again and place it back in the shadows. Not everything hidden must be revealed. Some things are more sacred in silence. The soap ledger in the main chamber. You sit near the soap cabinet, a wooden shelf where bars are sorted by hardness, scent, and use. You open the small ledger, tucked behind the bottom panel. It is not meant for customers. It is for workers. Past. Naders. Apprentices like you. The names have changed, but the handwriting remains curiously alike steady. Neat, intentional. Each day is recorded simply. Buckets poured. 23. Guests served. 18 towels laundered. 41 strange occurrences. 1. Coin inside soap. Gossip worth remembering. The baker's son kissed the coppersmith's daughter in the cooling room. You smile at the final note. You add your own. 1 gold ring left. 1 guest vanished. 1 poem rediscovered. Water temperature perfect. The cat stayed all day. You close the ledger and gently tuck it back behind the soaps. Visit from the firekeeper. You hear the footsteps before you see him. The farink, the furnace keeper, steps into the chamber, smelling of ash and fig leaves. Still here? He says softly. You nod. Too much to scrub? Too much to forget. He chuckles, sets down a half-eaten plum, and settles beside you. You know, he says. I think the hammam remembers. The stone, the walls, the pipes. It keeps things. He gestures upward. Even the smoke, I think. It goes up with people's regrets. You look toward the chimney. Even now, a faint wisp rises, just enough to carry a thought upward. The scrubbed circle you. Walk the hammam one final time. There is a spot in the main chamber, just beneath the central dome, where the steam always rises in a perfect circle. The marble there is slightly lighter than the rest. Some say it's from years of heat. Others say it's from prayer. Today, someone has scrubbed a symbol into it. Faint, nearly gone now, erased by droplets and footsteps. A circle within a square. Seen it before on the stone ledge of the Blue Mosque. A symbol of completion. And containment. You kneel beside it. Press your palm to the warm tile. Then stand. And leave it undisturbed. The final towel of all the towels used today, some rough, some perfumed, some new one remains, still damp, folded neatly, forgotten on the inner hook dot. You lift it dot. It smells of rose, oil and frankincense. A luxury blend dot. You do not know who used it, but you try it carefully. Fold it slowly. Not everything forgotten is lost. Some things are simply waiting. The lock and the lantern. You extinguish the final lamp. Pull the outer door shut dot and slide the heavy iron lock into place dot. The hammam is closed, but inside it is still warm dot, still breathing, still remembering. You walk home under a sky of deep indigo, with crescent moonlight catching in the puddles on the stones. The scent of soap clings to your hands. You carry no towel, no ledger, no words dot, only silence, and the feeling that you've witnessed something important, not grand, not history, but something real and delicate and woven into water dot. You wonder as you step into your sleeping chamber. In a world of loud empires and bold names, who will remember the keepers of towels, the pourers of water, the scrubbers of unnoticed stains? And a whisper of steam in your mind replies, "We will. We always do. Always do."